There's a specific kind of moment this video is about. Someone asks you a simple question. What do you want for dinner? Or what do you want to do this weekend? Or what do you actually think about this? And you feel it. The blank. Not the pause of someone considering options. The blank of someone who genuinely doesn't know. And underneath the blank, if you stay with it for a second, there's something else. A quiet alarm. Because it used to be easier than this to know what you wanted. And now it isn't. And you're not entirely sure when that changed. This video is about that blank, about what it means that it's there, and about something that almost no one says clearly about what happens to a person who has spent years making sure everyone else is okay. The self doesn't disappear, but it does go somewhere. And by the end of this, you'll know where and why. Here's what nobody says about this. The loss of self that comes from people-pleasing isn't dramatic. It doesn't happen in a single moment you can point to. It doesn't arrive with a clear before and after. It happens in accumulation. 10,000 small moments where you swallowed what you actually thought. Where you adjusted your answer before you'd even finished forming it. Where you felt the pull of what someone else needed before you'd checked in with yourself at all. Each one, individually, barely registers. A softened opinion here, a deferred preference there. A feeling you decided it wasn't worth mentioning. You were being considerate. You were keeping the peace. You were being good. And somewhere in the middle of all that consideration, the habit of checking in with yourself quietly stopped. Not because you decided to abandon yourself. Because every time you checked in, the answer you found there created friction. And it became easier, then automatic, to stop asking. Research on this pattern consistently shows that sustained self-suppression doesn't just change behavior. It changes access. The more reliably you override your own internal signal, the harder that signal becomes to hear, which means that blank isn't nothing. It's the sound of a frequency you've been turning down for years. And when you look closely, there are specific signs that this has been happening. Not as a checklist, not as evidence of what's wrong with you. As recognition, the kind that makes something that has been nameless finally have a shape. The first one is the blank you already know. When asked what you want, you feel yourself search, not inward, but outward. You look for the answer that will cause the least disruption, the one that fits, the one that won't cost anything, and you offer that and call it a preference because you've been doing it long enough that you can't always tell the difference anymore. The second sign is the room reading. You know what everyone in a given space is feeling before you know what you're feeling. You walk into a room and your nervous system immediately begins its assessment. Who's tense? Who needs handling? Where the emotional weather is coming from? What will be required of you? And you do this before you've taken your coat off. Before you've said hello. Before you've had a single thought about how you are. The third sign is the shape-shifting. There is a version of you at work. A version of you with your parents. A version of you with your partner. A version of you with friends who need a lot. And they are not entirely the same person. You've been adjusting so automatically for so long that you're no longer sure which version is closest to true, or whether any of them are. The fourth sign is the day that belongs entirely to you. Someone gives you a free afternoon. No obligations. No one to manage. Nowhere to be. And instead of relief, there's a low-grade panic. Because you don't know what to do with it. Not because you're bored. Because you've been so oriented toward what everyone else needs that existing without a function to perform feels unfamiliar, almost wrong. And the fifth sign is the resentment without a target. It arrives without warning. Someone asks you for one more thing. Something small, something reasonable, and something in you reacts in a way that surprises you. A flash of anger you don't think you're entitled to. A fatigue that feels out of proportion. A thought you immediately suppress and feel ashamed of. Here's what that resentment actually is. It's not evidence that you're secretly selfish. It's the accumulated weight of needs that have had nowhere to go. Resentment is what emotions do when they've been turned away at the door long enough. None of these signs are character flaws. Every single one of them is the logical consequence of a nervous system that learned, very early, to prioritize external states over internal ones. And there's a reason it learned that. This didn't start recently. It didn't start when you became a people pleaser in any conscious sense. It started earlier, in an environment that taught you something it probably didn't mean to teach you, but taught you thoroughly nonetheless. That the version of you with no needs was easier to love. Not necessarily through cruelty, sometimes through need, A parent who was overwhelmed, a household that required management, a sibling who took up a lot of space. Sometimes through withdrawal, sometimes through the specific silence that followed when you wanted something and wanting it made things difficult. However it happened, your nervous system received the message. And your nervous system is very good at its job. It learned. The version of you that asks for things creates friction. The version of you that has opinions can cause a disruption. The version of you that exists without a function to perform is harder to justify, so it built you a safer version. A version that scanned before speaking. That softened before responding. That found out what was needed before deciding what to offer. Not a flaw. An adaptation. This is the part that matters. The self that went underground did not go because something was wrong with you. It went because something was happening around you that made it unsafe to stay visible. You became very good at the version of yourself that kept things stable. And you have been living as that version for so long that you've started to believe it's the only one. That's the mechanism. Not weakness. Not a habit you developed carelessly. A response your nervous system constructed because, at some point, it was what kept something safe. The question that comes after isn't whether you can undo it overnight. It's whether you can begin to ask different questions than the ones you've been answering automatically for years. If what's in this video is something you want to go further with, not just the understanding of how you got here, but the slow, specific process of finding your way back, there's a guided resource in the description built exactly for that. 5 modules. Designed for exactly this moment in the recovery. For the person who can now name the pattern and is ready to begin asking what's underneath it. Link in the description. Here is what this video wants to leave you with. The self you're looking for is not gone. That is not optimism. That is not the part of the video where something comforting gets said because it's time to wrap up. It is a description of how this actually works. The self that went underground didn't cease to exist. It was set aside, put somewhere, while the performing version handled what needed handling. And it has been there, quieter and quieter, waiting for a different kind of question. Recovery from this is not the same as becoming someone new. It's slower and stranger than that. It's more like remembering than building. A preference that surfaces and surprises you. Something you reach for on a shelf and realize you reached for it before checking whether anyone else wanted it. A moment where someone asks what you think, and something honest comes out before the filter has a chance to catch it. These are not small things. They are the beginning of something. The blank you felt at the beginning of this video, the one when someone asks what you want and you don't know, that blank is not a verdict. It's a symptom. And symptoms have causes, and causes, when you understand them, stop being permanent. The blank is asking a question. The question is, when did you last answer before you had time to check whether the answer was safe? That question is where this starts. Not with a transformation. Not with a decision to become someone different. With a moment, probably small, probably private, probably not visible to anyone else, where you let yourself know what you actually think. What you actually feel, what you would actually choose if the choosing were only for you. That moment is available. Not as an achievement, as a practice. As the first of many small returns to the self you were before you learned that being visible was something you needed to earn. If this opens something you want to go deeper on, the resource in the description is the next step, built specifically for this question. Who are you when you're not performing? Which of those 5 signs hit closest? And when do you think it actually started? The self you've been slowly setting aside doesn't come back all at once. That's not a warning. That's just what recovery actually looks like. Not the version where everything shifts in a single moment of clarity, but the version where something small changes, and then something else, and then one day you realize you've been answering the question differently for a while now. The person you were before you learned to disappear is not a stranger. She isn't someone you have to build from scratch. She's someone you have to remember. In the specific way you remember something you put down so long ago that you'd stopped expecting to find it. A preference. An opinion offered without softening. A need named out loud to someone who needed to hear it. These are not fluent yet. They don't have to be. What changes first is not the behavior. It's the noticing. The half second between the automatic yes and the moment you hear yourself say it. That space, however narrow at first, is where the returning begins. Not because you finally tried hard enough. Because you now have a name for what's been happening. And having a name for it means the next time the blank arrives, you know what you're in. You are not failing to know what you want. Your nervous system has been answering that question for you for a very long time. And that can change. Not all at once. Not without difficulty. But in the direction of someone you will recognize. That person is still in there. That's not optimism, that's just what the evidence says. And here is further than you were.